Hello and welcome, everybody. I hope that wherever it is in the world that you are at, you are doing fine and that you're staying safe and sound as we all are in these challenging times. I want to welcome everybody to the special program of this ongoing series, TADAIMA, a community virtual pilgrimage that's been happening since June and will be wrapping up sometime in the middle of next month. And welcome to the special program documenting history, making the CWRIC LA hearing tapes. My name is Abraham Ferrer, and I'm a staff member at Visual Communications, the nation's premier Asian Pacific American Media Arts Center. We were established in 1970, and this year we are in the middle of our 50th anniversary year, our golden anniversary year of service to the Asian Pacific American communities. So we're really, really excited, to have reached this milestone, and we are very, very happy, to be here to present this program. Just a little bit about what we're going to be doing here today. I mentioned at the top that Visual Communications has been around for a half century, and one of the things that has been very distinctive about the organization is that through its many film and media productions and other activities, whether or not they be in creation, presentation, training and education, as well as preservation, we have consistently worked to meet the moment, as it were, in terms of what is happening in our communities and how we as Asian and Pacific Islander people, advocate for our, rightful place in this American society. And one of the, key moments of visual communications' existence occurred in the year 1981. Just to set things up a little bit, back at the end of 1980, the Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment was formed as a way of fact-finding in terms of the relocation and incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II. And initially, as we're going to find out from our guest, there was going to be one single hearing that was going to take place in Washington, D.C., but through the efforts of several folks from the National Coalition for Redress Reparations, the CWRIC hearings were expanded to go into a variety of different cities, and Los Angeles was one of those. We're going to be talking about the Los Angeles Commission hearings that took place between August 4th and 6th, 1981. But we're also going to focus on a unique project that Visual Communications produced and executed along with NCRR, which was essentially gavel-to-gavel coverage of the whole 3 days of testimony from nearly 200 people that came out over the course of those 3 days. First, what I'm going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and start off with a little bit of a short excerpt, highlight reel of work. Now, this was produced by Dwayne Kubo and a whole team of videographers from Visual Communications, and they took the whole 26 hours of testimony and activity and boiled it down to a little 11-minute highlight reel that gives you a little bit of a taste or idea of what was happening during that event, and by way of expansion, the kinds of activities that were going on at CWRIC hearings that took place in Washington, D.C., and Seattle, and San Francisco, Chicago, and other places, and what have you. So I'll be back in a few minutes with our guests, but for now, let's go ahead and roll that clip.
Good morning and welcome to the first of a series of field hearings that the Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians will be having around the country. A couple of weeks ago, the Commission had its first hearings in Washington, D.C. We are scheduled to have a number of hearings around the country so that we can carry out the mandate given to us by Congress and the President to look into the question of wartime relocation and internment of civilians during World War II.
The trouble-free and relatively happy lives at all the other relocation centers can be attributed to a cultural trait of the Japanese, clearly seen in the Issei, but almost unheard of in their American-born grandchildren, namely the concept of gaman. Gaman is to endure with patience and dignity hardships, misfortunes, or injustices, especially those about which nothing can be done. I am sure there are activists among my audience who will be enraged at the suggestion that anyone was happy in a relocation camp. But how else, Mr. Chairman, can one account for the fact that for past many years, graduates of the camp high schools, for example, Amachi, Colorado, Minidoka, Idaho, Poston, Arizona, and others, have been holding 10th, 20th, and 30th anniversary reunions? How else can one account for the tremendous artistic output of these amateur How else can one account for the tremendous artistic output of these amateur artists who, having time on their hands, turned out little masterpieces of sculpture, ceramics, painting, and flower arrangement?
Please, I would like to tell the audience that the chairman is not disposed to make threats. The chairman will inform the audience that if we are going to have outbursts with respect to whatever one agrees with or disagrees with, we may just have to close the hearing to the public. Now, I know that emotions are high in this, but please, let's have people comporting themselves with some dignity here so that we can go through these hearings. There are going to be a lot of witnesses. We're going to have 3 days of hearings. We're going to have evening hearings tomorrow. And if we start off on this foot at this point in time, it'll be very difficult for us to continue with some deliberations here.
My wife, a U.S. citizen, and her family were evacuated to Arkansas via Santa Anita Racetrack. They received a telegram while in Arkansas, supposedly from Japan, that her family was being called back to Japan during the war and the American government had no other choice but to send them back. Upon reaching there, to their surprise, they discovered that Japan had not sent this telegram. It was later discovered that there were one family which was exchanged for the return of another family to the United States. Her father was killed by the atomic bomb at Hiroshima. Her mother and family were 20 miles away from the bomb site. I am led to believe that this is not an isolated case, and it is certainly an area that this commission should investigate.
Forgive my emotional outburst, but what you just said to me touched me so deeply. It sort of erased these 39 years of pain I could feel. 39 years of pain I've been feeling. And what happened in 1942. And I want you to know I appreciate those thoughts. All this bitterness that I've been holding inside of me has been coming out little by little. But I think with your speech tonight, I think it'll be gone forever. I just want to thank you for that. I wish it would be recorded somewhere. I'll read it over and over again, and I'll show it to my children. Because they were the ones who asked me about camp, I sort of kept it from them. And when he asked me why, and they asked me, why did I go to camp without protesting? And why did I behave the way I did? I didn't have any answer for them. And as the years go by, I understand. It was my cultural heritage. It was the fact that I was Japanese as well as American. And because of this evacuation, I really denied my children their Japanese heritage. I wanted to erase that part. I wanted to be 100% American and be accepted.
My name is Martha Okamoto. All right, I will try very hard, excuse me. My brother, it's in regards to my brother James, who was killed at Manzanar. I've never been able to talk about this. More people have come up to me and said I must speak up. My children, even my own children, don't know that my brother was shot in the back. And as this gentleman over here mentioned, I was at the Gardena meeting, but after Miss Baker, this Caucasian woman, the blonde lady, was so negative, I just could not stand it any longer. I couldn't even talk in a small group. And so I walked out and left. Tonight I have more courage because my husband is with me. But I've just gotten kind of rattled. And I would try to give it as I recall.
And that is to tell the Japanese American community who the real heroes of this community are. And all these times we've been seeing all these, I don't want to say, but paraded in front of the newspapers as community leaders. And they didn't do two bits for us. The people I want to thank in this community are the common people, such as the Nisei domestic, the clerk, and the gardener. And you know why? They are Why they are the true heroes? Because they kept us from starving while our own country turned its back on us. They worked hard, and they never got any recognition. If it wasn't for them, we would not have gotten that. One last thing, and that guy in here, he was on TV last night talking about his flesh crawling. He crawls too much to suit me. And you know who he is. The only reason he wears a tam o' shanter is to keep his brains from spilling out.
The National Coalition for Redress and Reparation firmly believes that this commission should place the priority on correcting the injustice and to submit the following concrete solutions to Congress. First, we ask the continuing education of the public about the truth of this event so that the American people of today and in the future may learn from and not repeat past mistakes. Second, we ask the Commission to recommend whatever is necessary and appropriate to overturn the legal basis for the evacuation order so that no branch of government can arbitrarily strip away the freedom and civil liberties of any group of people. Third, we insist that the government include those of other races and nationalities who suffered similar unjust actions of the government, including the Aleutian, Pribilof Islanders, and Peruvians, in our pursuit of redress. Fourth, we ask for a community fund to help compensate for the sociological damages done by the evacuation. And most importantly, we strongly call for direct monetary compensation to each victim of the concentration camps or to their heirs who were affected by Executive Order 9066.
Gilbert Sanchez, and I am speaking on behalf of los Frente a los Pueblos Unidos. We are an organization based in the San Fernando Valley fighting for the rights of Latino peoples. And I would like to put it on record right now that we in the Frente believe that the Latino people will stand behind the Japanese people for reparations.
The people in this community, we're different people. We have different political viewpoints, different attitudes, values. But this is really the first time, I think, somehow or other, I've never felt closer to these people, to my people, than ever before in my life. And 40 years, I think we've been in, they talk about being let out of camp in 45, 44, 43. I don't think we ever did get out of camp. I think we're beginning to get out of camp now.
Hey everybody, we're back. So anyway, that was a little bit of an excerpt of the commission hearing tapes. And, needless to say, I'm not exactly sure if that's the commission hearing, highlight tapes that anybody here on this panel may be familiar with. I wanted to just apologize very, briefly for the technical difficulties that, caused the picture and the sound to separate dramatically and what have you. Technology, it's a thing. I think it's one of those things that happens in a COVID-19 environment and what have you. You just do what you got to do, right? So, anyways, what I want to go ahead and do right now is I want to go ahead and introduce the folks who are part of our presentation today. And if I can go in order here, I'm just going to go ahead and read this very quickly. First and foremost of all, we have Mia Iwataki, a founding NCRR member who was a contributing editor to East Wind magazine. She was the national press secretary to Congressman Mervyn Dimely, California, whose 31st district includes Gardena and Carson. She also produced KPFK's weekly Asian program East Wind and is currently a member of Nikkei Progressives. Hey Mia, how you doing? Well, thanks for joining us. Also, we have Kathy Masaoka, NCRR co-chair, who has worked on youth, workers, housing in Little Tokyo and redress issues since 1971. Currently, she works with the NCRR Education Committee, Nikkei Progressives, and the Vigilant Love Coalition to build solidarity and support for Muslims and others impacted by discrimination. Kathy, hi, and welcome. All right. Up next, we have Dwayne Kubo, all the way from San Jose, a co-founder of Visual Communications, who was the coordinator of sorts of the video documentation team of the CWRIC LA hearings. Retired from De Anza College, where he was the Dean of Intercultural International Studies, Dwayne is the creator of J-Town Community TV and a co-founder of the Silicon Valley Film Fest. Dwayne, how you doing?
Hi, folks.
Yes. All right, and finally, we have Roy Nakano, who was formerly the director of the UCLA Asian American Studies Center's Student Community Projects Unit, and he was also a testifier at the hearings on behalf of the Gardena Committee for Redress and Reparations, also known as NCRR Gardena chapter. Currently, he is the chief counsel for SBA's National Disaster Loan Resolution Center. Roy, thank you so very much for joining us on a Sunday afternoon.
Oh yeah, thank you for inviting me.
All right, excellent. So anyway, what we're going to do right now is just basically, you've seen the highlight reel, and in fact, through your involvement with NCRR and the redress movement and visual communications, I think it's safe to say that all of you, have seen these testimonies and a whole lot more over the years. The discussion here is basically like, how did this come together? How did visual communications and NCRR team up to produce this this coverage, not really knowing what kind of a life it was going to take on well after the events of August 4th through 6th, 1981 were over. Mia, I want to go ahead and start off with you, because one of the things that we did talk about was that when we were talking about the formation of CWRIC, that initially there was only going to be one single solitary hearing, and that was only going to be taking place in Washington, D.C. And you and other people from NCRR.
You're taking over my talk.
Basically, you and NCRR basically said, no, we're not going to do that and stuff, because we are all over the place and everybody needs to to be heard. So if we can go ahead and have you start off by talking about why it was important to not just have one single solitary hearing on the issue, and how did these multiple venues and in Los Angeles come about?
Well, first I wanted to say that the hearings really changed my life. The hearing room was electric, and for the first time we were able to hear in depth the anger, the strength, and the just stories of these amazing Issei, Nisei, and Japanese American people. And we hung on their every word. And each person who told their story had such strength. And their stories brought families together and brought our generations together. It was just really powerful.
Yeah.
To take a step back, the Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Civilians was established by an act of Congress in 1980 to review the facts and circumstances of the executive order to review the directives to the military and determine whether or not there was a military necessity to put Japanese Americans in camp and to recommend appropriate remedies. Well, there were also two other bills at the time. NCRR was working with Congressman Dimley, who was the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, to introduce a bill. And our Seattle folks were working with Congressman Mike Laurie, who introduced a bill. Those bills called for $25,000 in reparations right now for all the survivors and their heirs. And as we saw, of course, the commission legislation won. So in NCRR, we were pretty disappointed, although, you know, we kind of suspected that would happen.
Sure.
We even talked about maybe boycotting, but we knew that these hearings were going to go on with or without us. And then we heard, as you said, that the commission was planning to have one hearing in Washington, D.C., where they would just have legislators and Japanese American leaders and academics. And for NCRR as a grassroots organization, we wanted to see Redress focus on the camp survivors and be led by the camp survivors. So NCRR lobbied every single commissioner on the CWRIC. And in fact, Lillian Nakano and I even met with Joan Bernstein, who was the chair of the commission, and she was a consumer protection and environmental protection advocate in the Carter administration. She said she was happy that NCRR sent two women to meet with her. But anyway, NCRR shaped the commission hearings because we demanded that in order to have meaningful hearings, you had to have it in every major city in the US that had a significant Japanese American population. And so what happened was we had 7 hearings in, we had hearings in over 7 cities. The commission heard over 750 testimonies in 20 days of hearings in Washington, D.C., LA, San Francisco, San Diego, Seattle, Alaska, Chicago, and New York. And this was a result of NCRR's advocacy. So as you said, the LA hearings were August 4th through 6th. And, over 161 people testified. And LA was the only hearing that had an evening hearing for people that worked or, you know, weren't able to be free during the day. And that was the last testimony that I guess we blanked out with Bill.
And so I think it's really, really like amazing and stuff. What I want to do is I want to go ahead and just show a couple of still images right now. I think that we were like looking at a first one, and that was from day one, and that was the testimony of Senator Sam Hayakawa. These are from a selection of images that were made by former Gardena City Council person and Congressperson Paul Benai. You know, he basically documented much of this of the hearing all 3 days. And, you know, these images currently reside in the Paul Benai collection on densho.org. I want to go ahead also and contrast this with another image from something that happened a few days before the actual LA hearings. This was from earlier in the week, not this one, but an image from Westwood, UCLA, that shows George Takei and Mary Oda and another person. We're taking a look at another one and stuff. So anyway, but as we're looking at this, and I know that you guys have seen the images, but there definitely is a contrast seemingly between what was being what NCRR was trying to to get across to this commission and what have you, and how things worked out. Obviously, Sam Hayakawa's testimony did not go over so good, but definitely I think that the power of even those pre-hearings from people like George Takei and Mary Oda and and others was like very, very powerful. I think that we're going to take a second to find that image that I'm talking about. But Mia, in talking about the impact of ensuring that the hearings reached all a wide variety of different cities and involved as many voices as possible. Do you think that you guys pretty much accomplished what you were trying to set out to do, not just basically like have it just like one little single little event in Washington D.C. that may not be accessible to to the people that whose voices needed to be heard?
Kathy, did you want to?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it felt like what we were seeing a lot in our community, that there were certain, as Jim Matsuoka pointed out, maybe self-appointed leaders that put themselves in front of the redress and reparations struggle. And yet there was this whole grassroots movement that NCRR was involved in that really wanted to put the people who had suffered all these years up front. And so there was a lot of work that went into working with the testifiers. And I think, Kathy, you were going to talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah, Kathy, what kind of work went into, getting all those folks, together? I know that we can't exactly speak towards, all the other cities and what have you, but from Los Angeles, just getting all these people who probably were very hesitant or reluctant, to, get that, all out on the table and what have you. What kind of work and what effort did it take for NCRR to be able to like pack all 3 days, in even like an overflow evening session?
It took a lot of effort, Abe. I think we fought for hearings in all the cities. We wanted to fill the 3 days in one night. And what happened was people didn't respond right away.
Yeah.
And so a few weeks before, we had like 8 or 9 people. And I wanted to acknowledge the work that Jim Matsuoka and Bert Nakano and Lillian Nakano did, because they were our Nisei in NCRR. And of course, we thought they would have the best chance of getting Nisei. But Jim said he was starting to panic because people were not coming forward. We put ads in the RAFU, we put out, information. And finally, he told all of us at a general meeting, you all have to testify because we got to fill those testifiers. And so a lot of us did. I mean, I ended up testifying myself because we submitted our names. But, it took a lot of effort. And I think we realized Nisei and people that had gone through the camps were not going to just open up that easily. They hardly talked about it at all. So it took a tremendous amount of effort preparing people. And I also wanted to give homage to the Issei who testified, because they testified in Japanese. Well, they almost didn't testify at all because the commission was running late, and they said you could just submit it in paper, in writing. It was like, what? So Jim again stood up and said, oh no, I think Bert this time said, no, they've been waiting too long. You can't just treat them like that. And so they were able to say their testimony in either English or Japanese. But for a moment there, they were not going to be able to speak at all. And that was horribly insulting. Yeah. And I also want to say that Jan Tokumaru in San Diego, they brought up people to testify at the LA hearings. And they worked a lot with their people there, house meetings and earlier. All of us had house meetings to try to get people to open up, but yeah. So, one point. I think you heard Martha Okamoto talk about her brother being shot in the back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And she was one person that actually responded to the ad. She called Jim at his work, and he realized he needed to listen to her. And she testified he listened to her story, and her testimony was so powerful. I mean, I think it took a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of support. And I mean, people were were really great. I mean, they were so articulate. I have never been so proud of our community.
I know. It was like our people stood up. And I think once people started to testify after that first day, it was like everybody, you know, opened up. And it really turned some people around. Like one of the testimonies that we always refer back to is Yuji.
Right.
And he, in the beginning, he was so against the hearings and he felt it wasn't worth it. And he sat the first day with his, you know, with a, you know, grouchy face and everything. But after he heard the Issei and the Nisei testify, it just turned him around.
Yeah, I do want to say one thing about the video that you showed earlier, and I have to apologize because that was not VC quality. That was NCR quality. And and I have to acknowledge that Dwayne immediately got the 26 hours or 23 hours, whatever it was, and put it into a form that we could take out on the road. And that was invaluable. That was really the purpose of it. Yeah.
Great. At this point, I'm going to show a couple of more pieces by Paul Panay. You know, he was really Johnny on the spot, you know, all 3 days and stuff. And then this first image is the testimony of Charles Hamasaki. And I think that was a very, very, very animated testimony. He basically, if I'm not mistaken, he was describing the night that, you know, the FBI and the feds basically like, you know, barged in and, you know, and took, you know, their father and, you know, what have you. Very, very animated to say the least. And then the second piece that I wanted to show was the testimony of Amy Iwasaki Mass, who was a clinical psychologist, and I believe at the time she was an associate professor at Whittier College. I don't remember, you know, what have you. At this point, what I want to do is I kind of want to bring Dwayne, you know, into the picture, you know, to talk a little bit about, you know, how, you know, NCRR and you know, again, visual communications, you know, hooked up, you know, to produce this, you know, this documentation.
Thanks, Abe. So in many ways, I think the commission hearing shoot was very typical VC, meaning that we had no money, we didn't have a crew together, we didn't even have the equipment to shoot that event. So we just kind of started from scratch and started to put it together. However, I would say that by the commission hearings, we had 12 years of experience in VC in documenting community events. And so it was a real natural event for us to cover. We knew that the commission hearings were going to be important. We knew that we'd have to shoot them. We didn't have the proper equipment. I borrowed a 1/2-inch VHS recorder from Art Nomura. I remember writing a proposal to NCRR for $400 that Tim Masaoka took and wondered about, but we didn't even have the $400 to buy VHS tapes. And by the way, we shot 1/2-inch video, which was, even then, I mean, by then we had kind of graduated to 3/4-inch cassettes, but we knew that it was going to, I had actually estimated that the shoot would take about 40 hours. And so I do remember asking Jim if we could buy 40 one-hour tapes for $9.95 each. So we proposed a $400 proposal to cover the cost of actually shooting that event. And by the way, I think later we're going to see that iconic the iconic photograph from Roy Nakano of the entire commission hearings room. But we were scrunched underneath the commissioner's table for many, many hours shooting the people that were actually testifying. As people said before, the testimonies were just so moving. I mean, I could remember tearing up and literally crying while trying to focus on some of these people giving testimony, but the testimonies were just so powerful.
Oh yeah.
I think at that point we knew we were getting very historical material.
Oh yeah.
This was going to be a great document for our community.
Yeah. I name checked Paul Benai's picture of Amy Iwasaki Mass's testimony. I'm going to go ahead and put up right now a screenshot of of her testimony as captured by the visual communications cameras, what have you. And just by looking at this, the way that you had, tightened all the shots, it was very, very clear that, for all of these people, they deserve their minute. And, you intentionally wanted to be very, very intimate with each of those testifiers and what have you, because, yeah, just the power, of that image of Amy, talking about the effects, of internment and incarceration, is really, really powerful, whatnot. Roy, I wanted to, go to you because, of all the people that are here on this panel, you and I, have this kind of thing because, like, we rode, from UCLA together to downtown to the courthouse on a couple of those days and stuff. I basically was tagging along, and you were basically there as both a testifier and representing, the UCLA Asian American Studies Center. Dwayne was referring to an image that that you had made, which is essentially like a panoramic shot of the the courtroom and stuff. So clearly, clearly what's happening was that you were wearing multiple hats. That those days and stuff, as both a testifier, as an audience member, as a witness, and as a documentarian. If you can talk a little bit about your experience and how how that was for you as we find your iconic image and flash that up on the screen.
I think everyone was wearing multiple hats at that event. I mean, not just myself, but if you look at some of the other images that people refer to, like later on, we're going to see the one by Chris Matabayashi with Lillian Baker and Jim Kawaminami. I mean, she was there as a reporter, but she was also there as someone who is very much involved in the organization and getting the Issei, Nisei, and others to testify. The image that you referred to regarding the panoramic shot, things that we could do in those days, I'm not sure we could do today. I mean, that was taken behind the commissioners. Today, I think because of security concerns, they would probably not allow this to happen. But essentially, it's just crawling back behind the commissioner tables and just making sure that we could picture everything. We had a wide angle lens in order to capture the entire audience. Yeah, and luckily with the black and white film, we were able to get a pretty decent shot.
Yeah, we're looking at this image right now, and if I'm not mistaken, somewhere in there I can see Mia in the picture. This is all back in the days, like in the '80s, when everybody was rocking perms and everything. But but definitely, I always keep coming back to this image. It really, really talks about the power and the significance and the historic weight and gravity of those 3 days. And they I think is very, very fortunate that you were able to catch that that moment. In a second, I want to go back to an image that actually is uncredited, but it was a 3-shot of of folks who are speaking from the, I guess, like the activists and legal aspect of things. There would be I believe you, Roy, that was testifying on behalf of Gardena, and then you're accompanied with a couple of other people who are very familiar to visual communications people. One is Alan Nishio, who at the time was the Associate Dean of Students at Cal State Long Beach, and a former board member of visual communications. And to his left and to the right of us is Mike Marase, who is a member of NCRR, but also at the time he was involved with Little Tokyo People's Rights Organization as well. It's kind of like very unique and symbiotic, kind of a thing that a lot of the people who were involved with NCRR were also involved with community development struggles back in the day, also involved with visual communications, the Japanese welfare rights organization. So basically, really, this was kind of really the meeting of a whole lot of organizations, who, basically, said, to this commission, enough. It's time to, to listen to us, and it's time, for you to do something about the great, injustice that you did, to this community. Let me throw it out to all of you. In talking about, this particular image, are there any, recollections or anything significant that come to mind?
Abe?
Yeah.
I want to say, I think I would be remiss if we didn't say that, we worked with, and I see in some of the comments from Carol and Yano that the JACL chapters were also involved. And, I think there were some, I remember especially working with Harry Kawahata and Phil Shigekuni, who also were working with testifiers and bringing people. And I think, on top of that, I think there were individuals that just showed up, that just decided, because we had people like that joined NCR later, and they were like really, really feisty kind of people, like David Mahara. He demanded $2 million, and other people that just showed up at the hearings, like Jim Saito, who, was, just a firebrand, and, other people. But, so people showed up, but, other groups were involved in bringing people. And Mia, I think, didn't get a chance to talk about the Japanese translation for the Issei that was really critical. I mean, in those days, we thought a lot about the Japanese-speaking community in all of our programs and events, so that was kind of crucial, and giving them rides to the hearings as well.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to mention that, another partner that never gets mentioned is the RAF Shimpo. And they, I feel like, have been a partner with us all the way, and they continue to be. And I think that one of the things that NCRR wanted to do was to really, we knew there were so many people that wanted to get in the hearings, but they couldn't because they didn't have a large enough hearing space. And so we had every day, we had a press conference after the hearings, and we ran down, all the highlights that happened in the day. And at that point, even the major media was coming out, but the RAFU really, kept on top of it all the way through.
Great. At this point, I wanted to do a little bit of a case study in the ways in which, the video documentation, worked side by side with the still documentation, because there was a lot of it that was going on. And so basically, the first thing I want to do is I want to show a little clip, and I hope that we got all the technical difficulties all straightened out. This is the testimony of Jim Kawaminami, who was a member of the 442nd Nikkei Vets Association. His was a very, very powerful testimony in and of itself. But as you'll see towards the end of the testimony, it was majorly disrupted, and I believe that became a key flashpoint of the whole 3 days of the hearings and what have you. And then after that, we're going to go ahead and contrast that with an image that was made of the same scene. And when we get back, I want to go ahead and have Roy, talk about this, because I believe that he has like a very unique story, about how this all came about. So why don't we go ahead and take a second and let's take a look at Jim Kawaminami's testimony.
Remember
fairgrounds or racetracks, taking with us only those things that we were able to carry. Surrounded by barbed wire fences and guard towers, we were assigned living quarters. Many of the families were put into horse stables, which were very unsanitary and the stench was unbearable. Some of us were more fortunate in that we were assigned to barracks with knotholes in them and the sideboards to which you could see daylight. Rooms which measured about 8 feet by 12 feet was for a family of 4. Sanitation at these assembly centers were terrible, with the cesspool overflowing and the waste running down under the barracks for blocks. After spending many months at these assembly centers, we were sent out on trains to different relocation camps, which were located in the most desolated and remote parts of the country. Here again, we were surrounded by barbed wire fences and guard towers, manned by soldiers with rifles and machine guns. It is at these desolate camps that the Japanese people had to endure extreme cold in the winter and dust storms and extreme heat during the summer months. It is from these shameful environments that the Nisseis volunteered for the armed forces of the United States and to form and to join the now famous 100th 442nd Go for Broke Regimental Combat Team, which served and fought with distinction in France and Italy during World War II. I won't go into the battles and declarations that were won by the men of the regiment, for I'm sure by now you have read the statement to the Commission by General Mark W. Clark on July 14, 1981. He said it all what he said, I quote, "I hope and trust that this Commission will find that a grave injustice was done to a very patriotic sector of our population, and that early and appropriate remedies will be provided to those Japanese Americans who suffered and sacrificed much solely on account of their race and accident of birth. We of the 100th 442nd Veterans Association of Southern California concur with the redress and reparation of those people who were unjustly incarcerated in concentration camps during the war. As my final statement, I would like to read the resolution that was drawn up by the 100th 442nd Veterans Association of Southern California. Whereas on February 19, 1942, by Executive Order 9066, Franklin Delano Roosevelt set into motion the forced removal from the west coast of U.S. of approximately 120,000 Americans of Japanese ancestry, including among them their parents who were permanent residents of this country, and whereas the constitutional guarantees of this country were arbitrarily suspended as to only this specific ethnic group, thus depriving loyal Americans and law-abiding aliens, residents of this group, their constitutional rights, and whereas the vast majority of those persons who were removed from the West Coast were detained in U.S. concentration camps, and whereas from these very camps came forth the volunteers that promoted the formation of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team and later provided most of the replacements for the 100th 442nd Regimental Combat Team's battle casualty losses, and whereas the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, which included the 100th Battalion, became one of the most highly decorated units in the U.S. Armed Forces by reason of their exceptional contributions to the successes of the 5th Army in Italy and the 7th Army in France during World War II. And whereas on July 31st, 1980, the President of the United States signed into law PL 96-317, a congressional bill creating a presidential fact-finding commission to investigate the circumstances that brought about the forced removal of Japanese Americans, including parents, relatives, and friends of the members of the 100th 442nd Regimental Combat Team. Therefore, be it resolved, the 442nd Veterans Association of Southern California supports and urges the Presidential Commission fully and adequately implement the purposes and objectives of PL 96-317 and wherever appropriate, recommend equitable reliefs. Dated 8 January 1981, signed by the 6 officers of the association. Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
May I, in looking at a paper that was handed to me, there was a person by the name of Lillian Baker wrote an article, says she published in the Gardena Valley News, saying that the members of the 442nd has backed the so-called group that she is more or less the head of, saying that we are against all the things that we thought good. She says that the 442nd spokesman wrote to Supervisor Hahn and had a letter published in the Gardena Valley News and Ethnic Press stating that we are Americans, Japan was the enemy, that flag is our trophy. In other words, she is talking about a rising sun flag that was trophy that was put in the Patriotic Hall by some patriotic army group, and she claims that a lot of people are against that, which we have never, the 44th has never said anything of such to anyone.
No, wait. I'm sorry. Wait a minute. Listen.
I'm sorry.
If we have outbursts like this, we're going to ask people to be removed.
We know how some people are.
Now, wait a second. There are some. Could you please have some order? Could we please have some order so the panel may continue? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now you can all see what kind of people we have to put up with.
All right.
Oh,
So anyway, I do want to apologize. We are experiencing some technical problems where the picture is separating, and it's just like really crazy and what have you. But just to answer a question that we had from a Mickey Takamori as to whether or not there were Nikkei vets who testified as part of the hearings, the answer is yes. And although my memory is kind of like not all that, great these days and what have you. I do know that, Jim was one of the lead testifiers on behalf of the 442nd Vets Association, and there were quite a few others, if I am not mistaken, and what happened.
Abe?
Yeah.
Abe, I think the question was World War I vet, and that I don't recall. There were several World War II vets, but if someone is interested, they could also look in this book, Personal Speaking Out, that Eiko Herzig put together about all the hearings. And in addition, we have our DVD and a summary of all the testimonies and who they are.
Yeah.
So you can find that out, but
sounds good.
I don't recall World War I vet.
Yeah.
Abe.
Okay.
Abe.
If we could for a second. Yeah. What's up, Mia?
I just want to say, for the people that missed the clip,
yeah.
All that ruckus was about there's a horrible woman named Lillian Baker who rushed this. Okay.
Yeah, if you could, that's actually what I wanted to get to right now. So basically, what I want to do right now is I want to go ahead and flash up, this image. I did mention that there was also photo documentation of that moment, and one of the iconic images from the hearings was by a young woman named Chris Maru, who was affiliated with the League of Revolutionary Struggle, and she was basically like on the job, during that event as part of Unity News magazine. And as we basically show that particular image, which is essentially like a black and white distillation of all the ruckus that was going on, in the video that we unfortunately, could not get a chance to see. Roy, let me go ahead and start off with you, since we're talking about visual photographic imagery and what have you. Apparently you had a story to tell about how this particular moment came about. If you can go ahead and share that with us.
Oh yeah, before I do that, I want to just mention that it's Chris now goes by Matabayashi, which is the actual ancestral name. The name was shortened at one time, but it's now back to Matabayashi. She did say that she's going to try and tune in to this session if she could get her granddaughter to sleep. So anyway, she should be hopefully tuned into this.
Mm-hmm.
But this incident, what was happening was Lillian Baker, who headed an organization called Americans for Historical Accuracy, was a proponent of the Japanese American incarceration. And generally regarded as a camp denier, and she was passing out flyers at the event. Her, along with the lady you could see right behind her, Rachel Kawasaki, another person who was also with the organization. Susie Ling had picked up a flyer from Lillian Baker and showed it to me just as Jim Kawaminami was impaneled. And that's the flyer that inferred that the 442 Veterans Association was backing her position. And so at that point, I crawled around the front of the testimony table. Jim was not testifying yet. He was at the very end.
Mm-hmm.
And there were other people who were testifying. So I introduced myself, handed him the flyer, said, you may want to address this, pointed to the section where the flyer was inferring the support of the 442 with their position. That's the backdrop of it. What happened was after Jim gave the presentation and turned to the flyer, Lillian Baker walked up and tried to snatch the flyer back, but in doing so also snatched Jim Kawaminami's testimony. And that's when Jim stood his ground, did not want to let go of the papers. And that's what this image captures. You see Lillian Baker trying to get the papers away from Jim Kawaminami, Jim standing his ground, and then the California State Police trying to this one you don't really see, but the police officer there afterwards gave some elbow action to Lillian Baker to make her stand away from Jim so that Jim could continue on with the testimony. And then also what you didn't see was the police escorting both Rachel Kawasaki and Lillian Baker out of the commission hearings. So that's what happened. One of the immediate outcomes of that was the Gardena Valley News coverage, which up until that point had been trying to present a quote balanced view between the proponents and those who were against the matter of redress. Interestingly, the Gardena Valley News coverage took a significant, more supportive role for the Japanese Americans thereafter. Lillian Baker was a frequent contributor to the Gardena Valley News, and definitely this was a turning point, one of many turning points in the commission hearings.
Mm-hmm. Let me invite the other folks and what have you. I mean, like Dwayne, you and the VC team, captured, that incident on video, and it basically is very prominent in other, coverages and what have you. Kathy and Mia, when you take a look at this again and go back to this, was this the moment, that you and the other NCRR people said, okay, this is getting real now. We're in a fight. Right, because this was in 1981. Redress would be achieved in 1988. But the process of winning over hearts and minds, I really do think really started, among other things, with this incident. And
well, Abe, I what? As I listen to this again and again, it's sort of like I think I hear the voices of our community telling, get her out. I mean, people were so angry, and it's like, you don't usually hear that uproar,
right,
from our community. And it was like so strong. And people that listen to the DVDs today, you could hear that. And I mean, it still makes me feel very proud of our community. And, people aren't going to put up with it.
Oh, sure. I remember, and we couldn't see it in the clip that we provided, of all people, Evelyn Yoshimura just basically waving bye-bye.
Get her out.
Yeah, right.
So anyways, yeah, really. And then we didn't really edit that clip. So there was, these people that were by the door going like, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm okay. I think that everybody really was like in shock, that had happened. And obviously that is not the first time, nor it would have been the last time, that Lillian Baker and her group would, disrupt the efforts of NCRR.
And Abe, as you were saying, it was a very unifying moment for our community. And it kind of stuck because even after when we were, fighting for the actual appropriations to come to people, we were having meetings in different places. And there was a meeting in Gardena when Bob Bratt, who was the head of the Office of Redress Administration, was down, and he told us, I wasn't at that meeting, but he said that some of the guys from Lillian Baker's Americans for Historical Accuracy were at that meeting, and they were disrupting. And he said this Nikkei guy went up to this big white guy and clocked him right in the and you know what? That would not have happened if it weren't for the hearings and the unity that people in the community had, and that, we're not going to take this anymore.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Before we take a few questions from the audience, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and, talk a little bit about the legacies of the hearings and of the commission hearing tapes, what have you. I think that what I want to do is I wanted to show a couple of pieces. This is an image of Amy Uno from Chicago, and this is like a black and white image. And as I mentioned at the top, due to the hard work of Mia and all the other folks and what have you, the CWRIC commission hearings did not happen just in Washington, D.C. They were in all major cities with Japanese American communities throughout the country. But for one reason or another, for the longest time, a lot of the documentation of those different hearings was lost to the world, and for many, 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 many decades. DC and NCRR's documentation of this event was really the only, motion picture evidence that, this historic event took place. And with the discovery of the Chicago tapes just last year, through the efforts of folks, by Ryan Yokota and others, and digitized, through the initiatives of Renee Tajima Pena and highlighted in her recent Asian Americans documentary. I think it's fair to say that we're finally beginning to see the fuller picture of the CWRIC legacy. And also, I think that the event served as the springboard for sustained activism. I think that what I want to do here is I want to cue an image that was made by Glenn Kitayama, one of the NCRR Los Angeles members, on a trip to Washington, D.C. NCRR in 1987, took the unique step of going directly to Washington, D.C. and lobbying, Congress for monetary redress and stuff. If I can, ask you guys all, about, the impact, of CWRIC and how, within the context of a lot of things that were happening during the 80s, such as the struggle to free Chol Soo Lee, justice for Vincent Chin, the anti-Marcos movement and the People Power Revolution, and whatnot, and a whole bunch of other things that I'm kind of like blanking out on right now. Within that context, how do you see the impact of NCRR and CWRIC and the commission hearing tapes in terms of galvanizing the community?
Whoa, that's a big question, Abe.
I know.
But so 2 parts. Can I just? I really want to go back to the commission hearings. Really, I think made all of us as third generation Sanse, after hearing people, just gave us a whole lot of new energy. And we had, because we had the video, we could take it out and then build that movement in the community and educate the American public. So it was so invaluable in having the video, but also I don't think we would have moved on if we hadn't heard those stories, frankly. And I do want to say that NCRR has always been a group that looks to support others and built the movement, in solidarity and supporting and learning about other struggles. So I think that was important. But I do want to plug TOC later, Tales of Clamor.
Yeah, very good. Anybody else have any thoughts, on that? And Kathy, to your point, I think that NCRR was, even during the redress struggle, it was forward moving enough to recognize that the struggle for redress was something that was not separate from the larger realm of social justice. If I remember that NCRR was very, very active in the anti-apartheid movement, and what have you. So basically, if we're talking really about how, a movement for redress became, part of a larger third world fabric, and whatnot, that included African Americans and Chicanos and other Latinos, Native, Americans, and what have you. Hey, NCRR, it's right there. So I think that it was very, very impactful and stuff.
And I think NCRR enjoyed support from other communities too. Even at the level of Congress, the first people that were in support of redress were the Black Congressional Congress and the Hispanic Congressional Congress, and when we went on that 140-person lobbying trip, I mean, that to me all came from the hearings, because there were people of all ages, all walks of life, gardeners, workers, grandmothers, little kids. It was just a really, really powerful experience. And I think that what we did on that delegation was to put a human face on the issue for members of Congress. I think it was really important, regardless of what other people say.
I see. That's great. Before we talk a little bit about the lasting impact of the CWRIC tapes and stuff, let's take a couple seconds. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at our chat box and see if anybody has any questions from our audience that may want to ask any questions.
Oh, what happened to Roy?
Yeah, Roy may have cut out, but I think that he'll be back in a minute and what have you. But but basically there was that question I think that we answered from Mickey Takamori and what have you about like World War I folks and what have you and stuff. Most of the people that were testifying, Kathy and Mia, you did mention that there were some Issei who testified, but a lot of the folks were, were Nisei and Sansei folks and what have you. And I did mention the fact that, I saw some of my own peers testifying, what have you, like sharing the OPSU people and what have you, that really this was really a multi-generational event that demonstrated that the impact of relocation and confinement really had a lasting impact on subsequent generations of Japanese Americans. And for that alone, I think it was like very vital, to be able to have those younger voices, in there as well, to show that it wasn't just like a strictly Issei and Nisei thing.
Yeah. Is this where we're talking about Tracy Kato Kitayama and Tales of Clamor? Well, what she picked up on was the fact that the silence in our community was broken, and how difficult it was to break that silence, but how powerful it was at the same time. And so after seeing the commission hearings, I think Tracy created, and with Kennedy Kabasadas, created this really remarkable performance called Tales of Clamor, which we hope that it will be seen across the country. And I know that San Jose is perhaps going to, it was shown in LA. It was done in LA for several weekends, but it requires a lot of, it has trapeze and all this other stuff in it, but hoping that it could be launched again. And so San Jose may be the place that it starts off, we hope. Right, Dwayne?
Yeah.
Okay, I hope so.
Well, while we're waiting for Roy to get back, I did want to address a question from one of our viewers, Robert Shoji. Hey, Robert, how you doing? He wanted to find out if any of you, as well as Roy, ever get a chance to speak directly to Lillian Baker, whether or not it was like for a formal sit-down interview or or what have you. I kind of remember there was a Sunday morning interview thing on the local Sunday talk shows and stuff, and I believe that Lillian Baker and John Saito, who was formerly Pacific Southwest chapter of the JACL, were basically like speaking and what have you. I was going to say that if nothing else, Lillian Baker is a very forceful speaker, and and John, he was like quite purposeful, but I kind of think that if John Saito was changed with somebody like, say, like a Mo Nishida, there might have been like a bloodbath on stage. It kind of like is a kind of a different thing, most definitely. And so so basically, like has anybody had a chance to actually like speak directly with Lillian or anybody from that organization that she headed, any semblance of a rational discussion or what have you? Anybody?
I don't know. It was almost like a waste of time, but I know that they were just verbal sparring at. It was like she followed every meeting that took place in the Gardena area. She was there.
Or leave phone call messages about the American soldiers who were at the bottom of Pearl Harbor, things like that. No, we didn't engage her.
Yeah, it was like a waste of.
Yeah.
So Kathy Tokodomi mentions on the sidebar that Lillian Baker galvanized the Nikkei early on, and she thinks actually she contributed to the turnout to the hearings.
So, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great, and stuff. So I have a question here coming from John Tonai. Hey, John, how you doing? Thanks for joining us. Was there tension between Japanese Americans who wanted to testify / fight for reparations and those who didn't want to rock the boat? If so, how was it resolved? And I think that, gosh, it gets to like the whole thing where there was like the struggle, Kathy, you've already spoken to in terms of getting people to testify, but then at the same time, it is a reality that the experience of having been eviscerated through the experience of relocation and internment, really had such an effect, on people in the community that for many years they didn't want to speak up about it. Again, I think that passed down to their children, people in the Sansei generation, who were basically obliged to live under an early iteration of what we now know as the model minority construct, in which you got to do so much better than Joe or Jane America, because then that way nobody will screw around with you. Nobody will question your bona fides and what have you, and and whatnot. So if you can speak to that question.
Well, I think a lot of people, I mean, just think about it, being in a camp behind barbed wire, family separation, being in an environment where there were epidemics in camp. I mean, there's so many lessons we can draw from camps to what's happening today, to a lot of the immigrants, our immigrant population. But I think our people were, it was really damaging. And I personally think that most people that were in camp probably have a mild form of what we today know as PTSD. And so sometimes, it never leaves. But if I can be snarky for one moment, there were so many, I mean, the people that were not for redress and reparations, that spoke out strongly against it. And there weren't that many of them. But I noticed that when the $20,000 checks came, I didn't see anybody refusing it or saying, I'm going to just donate this back or whatever. And it just felt, I don't know, sometimes it felt hypocritical.
Yeah.
The Dan Lundgren, who was the chair of the commission, was very vocal in being against reparations all the way through. But even Dan Lundgren, in the end, decided that he didn't want to go down in history as the anti-reparations congressperson, and switched his position and supported it.
Oh, really? When did that happen?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because that's the other interesting thing. Dan Lundgren, he spent more time doing television interviews than he did being on the panel with the commissioners when we were having the hearings in LA. And his stance just for NCRR and other groups, we will not forget it. And so when Dan Lundgren decided to run for the treasurer, to be treasurer of the state of California, we sent people up there to testify against him. I was one of those people. And it was really interesting because the other people testifying against him were medical workers, garment workers. I mean, it was the union, all kinds of unions. Everybody. I mean, he had turned off and turned away so many people. He just had no chance. There were so many people testifying against him.
I want to speak to that last question. There's also a question about the time limit. Yeah, there was a time limit for people at the hearings because they were getting very late, and that's why they were going to cut off the Issei from testifying at all. But you know, the thing about the tension between fighting for reparations or keeping quiet, I think that goes on today within our community. Do we follow the people that were resistors, spoke up, stood up for their rights, or do we be the so-called whatever, you know, go along with the status quo and be quiet? I think that that's a decision that we're always making as a community, and you know, made in the camps and made it up until now. So it's something that, I mean, I feel like, I hope that we will speak up. That we've learned from Redress that we have to speak up.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Also, regarding the time limit, there was early on attempts by the commissioners to keep each testifier to a very strict time limit. And really, it wasn't up until the time that Jim Matsuoka erupted, which was another flashpoint in the hearings, that the commissioners backed down and decided take all the time you want.
Yeah. I remember that. He basically basically let them have it, and they basically said, okay. You know, whatnot. And that last question came to us, you know, by author and filmmaker Kim Mochizuki from Seattle, the novelist and co-director of the 1980s film Beacon Hill Boys. So Ken, thank you so very much for that question. It's good to hear from you. Good to know that you know, you're here joining us you know, today and stuff. What I want to do right now, if there aren't any other questions, and I'll scan to see if there are any, is that I want to go ahead and finish up on that final image that I prepared for folks. And this is from December 15th, 2017. And what had happened was that in the years since Redress had happened, Visual Communications and NCRR basically took the 26 hours of the CWRIC LA Commission hearing tapes, preserve them, knowing that at that time there were no other tapes from any of the other cities that anybody could find, and repackaged the whole thing as a 13-part series called "Speak Out for Justice." On this particular occasion, some of these folks here. That includes Evelyn Yoshimura and I believe Jim Matsuoka and Sumi Seki, I believe it is.
Yeah, Sumi Seki at the end.
Yeah, and stuff.
Harry Kawahara.
And Kerry Hawakara all were able to talk about the impact of the tapes and what have you. And this basically goes to the whole idea that with this group of people here, we've had these conversations over the years, what have you. But of course, we're here in Los Angeles and what have you, and not all of us get a chance to go to any in-person pilgrimages and what have you. I unfortunately have not experienced an actual camp pilgrimage, unfortunately, but by having TADAIMA, the community pilgrimage, one of the great things is that it takes this conversation about the making of the CWRIC tapes and what ultimately became Speak Out for Justice, to the larger community. We're speaking to what I imagine is a nationwide audience right now, and basically sharing stories about how we reclaim history, how we reclaim our heritage and our memories of things that happened to us and what have you, and how very easily this heritage can become lost if we don't take care of it and make sure that it is there for everybody to experience and to learn from, what have you. In the few minutes that we have, before we wrap up, I wanted to invite folks, to summarize, the impact of the making of the CWRIC commission hearing tapes here in Los Angeles. Dwayne, let's go ahead and start off with you, because unfortunately we weren't able to see the end credits. There were nearly 20 people from Visual Communications that were basically coming off of the Vaitafe Running Waters production, to basically do what essentially amounted to one last rodeo, before Visual Communications transitioned over into being a full-service media arts center away from being a filmmakers collaborative. Can you talk a little bit about the impact of creating those tapes, with the Visual Communications crew, and the lasting impact that those tapes have had?
Kathy started to talk about Tales of Clamor, and when I saw that in LA, I thought that was great. Probably the best use of the commission hearing tapes that I've seen. I mean, I know we use them to organize our community, but in a creative way, that was really amazing. And I would love to see something more like that. In fact, I was going to say that there's so much good dramatic material in those testimonies that a feature film should be considered by one of you filmmakers out there. There was even more drama around Lillian Baker, because in addition to the actual physical attack in the hearing room, the evening before and the morning of the hearings, Americans for Historical Accuracy threatened to disrupt those hearings. And so we had people also ready to try to deal with that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of behind the scenes drama that was going on in addition to the actual hearings. There's plenty that we could bring out.
Yeah, we have less than 2 minutes. Roy, Kathy, then Mia.
Definitely, the hearings had an impact on the writ of quorum nobis court case that happened thereafter. It was really the uncovering of Freedom of Information Act information that really came out of the commission hearings that led to Fred Korematsu being able to go back into court and fight the criminal conviction. That also led to Minya Sui and Gordon Hirabayashi doing the same. So just in terms of court cases, it's had quite an impact.
Great. Kathy?
Yeah, I want to ditto both Dwayne and Roy and just say that, I mean, the truth is coming from the people. So these stories are real history. And every time I see it, I learn something new. And I think that I really would encourage people to see them and listen to them, because these people are not around anymore.
Yeah. And Mia, last word.
I ditto everyone. And every time I see it, I not only learn something new, but I keep crying. It's so moving. And especially I want to emphasize what Dwayne said about Tales of Clamor, how well they use the commission hearings to and just put life into the whole struggle. And I think Tales of Clamor can bring this experience to the generation that wasn't able to come to the commission hearing and bring it to life. And I think that's really important right now. Because of these hearings, I think our community is supportive. Like after 9/11, our community stood up for the Muslims. During the detention of immigrants, our community knows that we don't want those camps used for detention centers. And even how Little Tokyo responded to some of the Black Lives Matter protests, I really think the camp experience and the hearings and winning that victory of redress and reparations has really brought our community to a different level.
Excellent. And I think on that note, we'll go ahead and end it right there. I want to thank each and every single one of you for joining us today. Kathy, Mia, Dwayne, Roy. We were talking about the CWRIC Commission hearing tapes, and if anybody is interested in checking out all 26 hours of them, as I mentioned, Visual Communications and NCRR did preserve them and are marketing them right now as a 13-part series called Speak Out for Justice. There's 13 episodes, or else you can also access the Reader's Digest condensed version, and stuff. And then plus Mia is showing a book that NCRR produced on the grassroots struggle for redress and what have you. And if you want to find out more information on visual communications and Nikkei for civil rights and redress, there's information at the bottom of the screen. Very quickly, I want to send a shout out to the people who helped organize this, and that was Aaron Ayama, Kimiko Mar, and Hanako Wakatsuki Chong from the virtual pilgrimage group. I also want to thank Royce Dorazio for helping us. I know that those videos, it's like, but we did the best that we could. And we want to also send a special shout to Clement Hanami, who who also was involved with getting this project started and what have you. I also quickly want to mention that a couple visual communications productions, Dwayne's Cruise in J-Town and Ellen Kondo's I Told You So, are now streaming at the TADAIMA virtual film festival. And later on this week, if you check out the week 8 program, one of our fellow NCRR members, Steve Nagano, will be doing a short program, if I'm not mistaken, talking a little bit more specifically about the Speak Out for Justice series and what have you. So anyway, that's it for all of us, and I want to thank all of you once again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you to Diana.
Yeah, thank you.